If you or maybe even one of your kids is in need of not just a budget gaming PC going here into 2022, but one that's repeatable and easy to build in this just terrible GPU market, then I 100% or 200% got you covered. Let's get into it. So why exactly do I have two builds on the table today instead of just the typical one? It's because I'm gonna show you two different methods on building a very similar but repeatable gaming PC, just depending on how much you wanna spend. Over here on my right, we have the more budget option, and this one comes out to just around $350 and includes all new parts except our CPU with built-in integrated graphics. We'll talk about the specific components in just a second, but the other build here is rocking just a couple of different upgrades, and this one costs just over $500, and honestly, it's even a bit cheaper than what I paid a couple of months ago because this CPU with integrated graphics is getting cheaper and cheaper by the day. Now, one thing that I do advocate for on both of these systems, or like literally any PC that you build, is to indeed activate Windows 10 or Windows 11. I'm still personally preferring Windows 10, but that's just my personal preference. But good thing the sponsor of today's video is going to help you out with that.
Real quickly, I just wanted to remind you guys that today's build was indeed activated with Windows 10 like all of my PC builds and flips, and I personally use GVG Mall, which is also the sponsor of today's video. From now until the end of December, they're actually increasing our normal 18% discount all the way up to 30% off, so you can get a legit Windows 10 activated version without that nasty watermark for a really cheap price. They also have great prices on other software like Office 2021, and even game keys from platforms like Steam, Origin, and Uplay, and they even have console stuff too like PSN and Xbox prepaid cards as well. Activating that Windows 10 on your computer is super simple to do. The entire process of buying and activating takes like 5 minutes total, so make sure you click that first link down in the description, and don't forget to use discount code ZTT18 for 30% off.
All right, so with that out of the way, let's break down the parts list of both of these systems, and unlike my usual style, I want to truly dive into why I chose these parts and how to replicate them for yourself, even if you don't find the exact parts that I used. And just as a quick side note, if you aren't personally interested in having to find all of the deals or physically putting these builds together, then I'm indeed going to be selling both of these over on my website, zackstechturf.com. And for the first time ever, we're actually going to be building multiple versions of these builds, so they'll hopefully stay in stock a little bit longer. Link is down in the description. All right, so starting with the parts list that both of these builds are using identically, the case here is the Montech Air 100 Black, and it's easily one of my favorite micro ATX options on the market right now. Well, it's kind of on the market. It's actually been out of stock for a couple of months now, at least the $70 version that comes with 4 RGB fans pre-installed, which I love, by the way, but we do have some insider information that they're going to be in stock here relatively soon in early 2022, so be on the lookout for that. The reason why I love it so much is because you're just getting so much value for the price. Not having to install the RGB fans yourself also saves a ton of time, and since the case does pretty much all of the aesthetic work for you, it allows you to throw in some not great budget looking parts in the build and it'll still look clean AF. There are indeed other options that you can go with here, and this is easily the least important decision in this build guide because it's a subjective one, but some other options that I personally recommend for a build like this are the Montech Flyer paired with some up here RGB fans, and I really like the Apivia Prodigy, which has some similar value to the Air 100. Moving on though, we get to the power supply, and for both these builds, we're easily able to get away with a super budget unit like the EVGA 450BR, which you can usually find on Amazon or EVGA B stock for $25. For a slightly better option, there's also the Asus Tough Gaming 450 watt unit that usually sits around $35, but it'll sometimes creep down to the same 25 as the EVGA unit, and then it's a much better buy. The reason we can get away with such cheap power supplies in these builds is because they don't have graphics cards, obviously, but it's very important to note is that if you think you're going to upgrade to a beefier graphics card in the near future, then just upgrade that power supply now so that way you don't have to do that later. Next up, we have storage, and this is such an easy component to tackle right now. The price of NVMe drives has been so low in the past couple of months that it's not even fun when you find a good deal anymore. I would recommend going with literally any reputable 500GB NVMe drive that you can afford, but in today's build, I'm simply using the Clevcraft C710 drive. These look aesthetically clean and minimal, have decent speeds of around 2000 over 1600, and they often go on sale for like $41 and sometimes even cheaper than that. If you want a more meta option for a few bucks more and a bit more reliable of a unit, definitely go with something like the Crucial P5 or the WD SN750. Next up, we're getting into the more performance oriented parts, and we'll start with the RAM. This is actually a way more important of a decision, so listen up because I was actually kind of surprised by this, and this is because the Ryzen APUs that we're about to talk about rely heavily on these RAM speeds, and you don't want to cheap out on this selection. We all know that Ryzen loves fast RAM. We've all been saying it over and over again over the last couple of years, but it's been a really long time since I actually physically witnessed the difference between 3000 megahertz, 3200 megahertz, and 3600 megahertz. I was completely blown away by the results, especially with these budget APUs. Sam actually tested these out for us, and although I don't have specific numbers to show you in this video, just jumping from 3000 megahertz to 3200 megahertz was giving us a near 10% increase in FPS. And when you're already gaming with lower numbers because of the budget hardware, that extra 10% gives a huge difference in the enjoyability of the game. For budget APU builds like this, I'll never recommend anything lower than 3200 megahertz ever again. We do have 3200 megahertz in this cheaper build just to cut down costs, but guys, I would honestly recommend just spending those few extra bucks and getting the 3600 megahertz kit like we did with this more expensive build. Just like the SSD deals, RAM deals are equally easy AF to find these days, so just go with whatever deal you may find. Check out the ZTT Deals channel in the ZTT Discord server, by the way, to help you out with that. But yeah, the two kits that I used are the XPG Z1 16GB 3200 kit for the cheaper build and the Neo Forza 16GB 3600 kit for the $500 build. And with all those parts wrapped up, we get to the last two choices here, the CPU and the motherboard, and I'm pretty sure you could already guess at this point that we are using the Ryzen 3 3200G in the cheaper $350 build and the Ryzen 5 5600G in the $500 build. Both of these APUs have built-in integrated graphics, which we'll run the numbers on in just a minute, but also really importantly is that both of these CPUs, despite being different generations, can actually operate on the extremely inexpensive B450 motherboards. We're actually using the Asus Prime B450M-A2 in both of these builds. Definitely not a future-proofed 100% meta option here, but they are simple, clean, work right out of the box, and we didn't have any issues with them. Oh, and they're also really cheap, which is the biggest bonus of them all. But going back to these APUs, I want to first talk about the Ryzen 5 5600G because honestly, I think a lot of people slept on that launch. This Ryzen 5000 series launch was definitely a fun one, but that was honestly because of the other CPUs like the 5600X, and not a lot of people talked about my favorite part of the launch, the 5600G. It's rocking 6 cores and 12 threads, comes with the Wraith Stealth CPU cooler to cut down costs even more, which you know I like, but most importantly, the gaming performance that you can get with this built-in Radeon graphics is actually much better than what most people think. Here's a chart showing 10 games benchmarked, and you can literally see that every game that you throw at it is at least playable in 1080p resolution, and honestly, not that bad for this budget price. Here you can see CSGO at 160 FPS, Valorant at 153, Rainbow Six Siege at 67, and even Fortnite gets 137 FPS, which I may or may not be getting re-addicted to, just as a side note. But now here on the budget side of things, we have the kind of forgotten child of the 5600G, the Ryzen 3 3200G, and although this one is indeed cheaper, it is way harder to find right now because scalpers suck. Chances are that if you search Ryzen 3 3200G right now on Amazon, eBay, or Mercari, you're gonna see some ridiculous listings, but I've personally been sniping them every time I see them go under $125, and I recommend doing the same thing. For $125, you're getting both a CPU and GPU for the time being, which is indeed some objectively good value, but please don't overpay for this one because the price of the 5600G is dropping every single day. The cool thing about these builds though is that literally every part can be the same exact except for the APU, so if you're trying to copy this build for yourself, just start buying the deals that you're seeing now, and if you end up with enough money for the 5600G, go for that, and if you don't, then just be patient and try to snipe a 3200G for a bit cheaper. Here are the same benchmarks for the 3200G, by the way. As you can see, we are getting still playable results for a lot of these titles, but they are certainly less than the 5600G as you would expect. And also because Sam's a benchmarking god, he benchmarked even more games for you guys. Here are the extra games for both the 3200G and 5600G for you to see, and they are mostly the harder to run titles, still in 1080p mostly. And just to keep this video 100% newbie friendly, if you don't completely understand the concept of these APUs, the best thing about these build guides is that you can easily add a GPU upgrade whenever you find one, or whenever you wait out this awful GPU shortage, and then this gaming PC will turn into an absolute beast. Both the 3200G and 5600G can handle some seriously powerful graphics cards. Just remember to ensure that your power supply is good enough to handle the upgrade whenever you do that. Now, before letting you guys go, I do want to remind remind you guys that if you're a bit more PC market savvy, then you can 100% beat both of these options in terms of price to performance. The 5th episode of Flipping Friday easily beats these for just $500 as well, and you can check out that video in the top right hand corner. But the point of this video was to show you the most repeatable and honestly just easy option that is perfect for maybe somebody that's just jumping into PC building for the first time, or if your kids have been nagging you for a PC for months now and you're ready to just pull the trigger and get them off your back. I can't wait for my 2 boys to start building their own PCs. They'll hopefully be doing it in just a couple of years now, but make sure you subscribe down below, that way you don't miss that. Just like always, I'll have absolutely everything linked down in the description, and once again, don't forget to activate Windows 10 with the GVG Mall link that's linked down there as well, so you can save some good money. Also, feel free to click the video that's on the screen now to see that Flippin' Friday episode where I show a different way to build a $500 gaming PC, and most importantly, I hope you enjoyed this video.